All right, so the story I'm going to tell you now is happened when I was 6 years old, and um, so growing up, I hung out with my grandpa as much as I possibly could. I loved him. If if he ate something and broke wind, I could tell you what he ate because I was always up underneath him. We would work together, and he chewed tobacco. So if he spit, I would come home and I'd have like brown streaks on me from his red man, where he'd spit and forget I was beside him, and he ended up spitting on me because I was always up underneath him. So uh, we grew up on a tobacco farm, and we had plant beds, which is where you take these tiny little tobacco seeds, like the size of a grain of sand, and you plant these evenly distributed in these long beds covered in plastic with perforated holes in the plastic so it could sweat and build moisture and allow the seeds to germinate. When the seeds get to a certain height, or the plants get to a certain height, you pull them out one by one, and then you transplant them one by one into the fields, into the long rows that we see in tobacco fields. Now, while these plants are growing, we would go 2 or 3 times a week, pull the plastic off, water the fields with an irrigation system, or water the beds, and pull the plastic back, tuck it back in, and allow that to build the moisture and sweat to do the germination. So my grandpa had a special place that he always used to seed his tobacco plants. It was a farm not far from I-95 near Dunn, and it had a bunch of ponds around it. So we had the ability to take a tractor and an irrigation pump and run aluminum pipe and sprinkler heads and water the fields. My bonus for hanging out with Grandpa was I got to be with him, hang out with him, just me and him, and I would get to crank the tractor and watch the sprinklers run. And that was always a big thing when you're young, cranking something up. So we go out to this farm and crank the tractor up, and we get ready to try to water, but the pump won't prime. The suction line off of the pump is down in the pond, and a bunch of bullfrogs had gotten to it, and it clogged the end of the strainer that filters the water into the pump. So Grandpa, no nonsense person, on a Sunday, just walks right down into the water, pops the filter off, shakes the bullfrogs loose, and they had a hole in the filter, so some of them had gotten inside. He just reaches up in the pipe, grabs a mess of nasty bullfrog meat, throws it out, fussing, puts the filter back on. Then he goes up to the pump, which had a hand primer on it, and he's priming it. And I can't prime it because this it's above my head. So it's impossible. But he gets to priming it, and eventually it changes tone where it's sucking in water. Boom, the sprinklers take off. And I'm standing there watching these sprinklers go off, and Grandpa's kind of stumblish. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" He says, "Glenn, I don't feel good." And I'm always agreeing with him, regardless of what he says. I'm like, "Grandpa, you don't look good." And I said, "So what's wrong?" He's like, I don't know. I don't feel good." So I'm sitting there watching him, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, "Man, can you help me get to the truck?" Now, mind you, he has a little 1981 Ford Courier. It's like a little tiny truck, like a Mazda, and it's on the other side of these fields where the plant beds are at. So I'm like, "Yeah, I can help you get there." And so I shut the tractor off, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, so I have to walk like stiff-legged, like I'm on stilts, because I can't take the weight. I'm so small. But we walk real slow all the way down through the plant beds. I get him to the truck, open the door up, sit him down. He looks worse. And he says, "Hey, can you drive home?" And I'm like, "Sure, I can drive home. I'm 6. So he slides over into the passenger seat of the pickup truck. I get into the driver's seat, and I can't crank the truck because I'm not tall enough to push the clutch down, hold the steering wheel, and reach over and turn the key because I don't have any leverage. And the reason I don't have leverage is because I'm so short. So, like to kind of show you what I mean is, like, I'll take this chair here, and let's say this chair is the bench seat in the truck. By the time I push my body back, up against it to get leverage, I'm not long-legged enough to push that clutch down. And so I said, Grandpa, I can't crank the truck. He's like, don't worry about it. He slides over beside me, reaches his foot over, pushes the clutch down. I turn the key and we crank up. So I said, well, if I can't push the clutch, I can't change gears. He said, well, I'll handle the clutch, the brake, the gas, and the gears. You need to steer. I can't see good. So I'm standing up in the pickup truck with my back and my butt up against the seat, and I got the steering wheel because it's way big, you know, because I'm so small. And I can't see over the steering wheel because it's taller than me. So now all I can really see is the steering wheel, half moon shape, and the dashboard. So I've got like this weird half moon shape, you know, that I'm looking out the windshield. And so we take off. He gets the truck in like second gear, and we're just putting along. We get out on the road. I drive down that road across I-95. I drive down 301. I turn back Cheryl Baggett Road, cross I-95 again, go through Falcon and get to the farm. It's 13 miles. And we're just putting along 15, 20 mile an hour, and I'm worried to death because he's not feeling good. Now, while this is happening simultaneously, my grandma is taking a nap at the house. And the reason she's taking a nap is because she's a heart patient. She'd fix us lunch every day. We'd help her clean up the dishes, get them to the sink because no one could wash them. She wanted them washed like she wanted them. We'd sweep the floor, and if it was a barning day, like a farming day, we'd mop the floor as we walked out because she wanted her kitchen clean at all times. But it's a Sunday, we don't have to mop today, but we did help her get all the stuff up. So we take off to water the plant beds. Grandma washes the dishes, and then she would go sit in her lazy boy and take like an hour, hour and a half nap. And she called it letting her heart catch up because she was a heart patient. So she's taking a nap. She does not know I'm driving home with Grandpa sick. Grandma tells me later that when I get older, we're talking about this, and she's like, Glenn, God spoke to me twice in my life that I could actually hear him. So the first time God talked to her, my uncle, her son, got killed in a car wreck when he was 23 years old going to guard duty on a Sunday. He should have got drafted for Vietnam, but he got into the Guard because he had a lot of farms and a lot of equipment and decent sized farmer. So basically, he pleaded his case, saying, "I'm gonna lose everything I got if I get drafted and go to Nam." And on the other side, nobody was coming back from Nam, so Grandma and Grandpa certainly didn't want to lose their child. Nobody would. But he goes guard duty, and basically one day going to guard duty on a Sunday morning, he's at the main stoplight in Fayetteville at like a Sandpiper restaurant. A transfer truck comes up behind him, never hits the brakes, hits his car, he's parked, drives him into a set of light poles, and he's killed in a car wreck. So later that night, it's been a crazy day, you know, her child's passed and all this stuff, and they don't get to bed till like 3 in the morning. She locks the house up, she goes to bed. She said she laid there for like an hour and she just couldn't sleep. So she gets up and she goes to get a glass of water in the kitchen, and says when she walks through the living room, she looks over and Uncle Jimmy is there, full dress, like he was going to the guard. The front door's open on the house, and the storm door's open, and it's held like halfway, and he's holding it open. And she said for a second she thought, like, oh my God, this has been a nightmare. Like I went to sleep. What a crazy dream. And she's like, Jimmy, what are you doing here? And he's like, I just come to tell you, Mom, I didn't suffer. Everything's okay. I got somewhere I gotta go, and you know where I'm going. Don't worry about me. I didn't suffer. And she says she watches him. He shuts the door, the storm door shuts behind him, and he walks off. And she realizes, like, you know, it's not a dream. So anyway, God had told her to get up that night. Now, I'm driving home during this story, and Grandma's asleep in the lazy boy, and she said God tells her, Johnny Lou, that's her name, you need to get up. So she opens her eyes up, she says, yes, God. She's looking around, she knows she's the only person there. She's the only person on the farm. We're gone. And she gets up, she's kind of looking around like, what's going on? She walks to her kitchen sink, and she's just standing there. And she said audibly, like, all right, God, what do I need to get up for? Nothing's happening. Grandma took a bunch of pills because of being a heart patient and all these surgeries she went through. So she has a little clear glass on the back of the sink. She picks up the clear glass, puts some water in it in the sink, and she's drinking it. And as she's drinking it, she says she looks through it because it's clear, and she sees me turning in the driveway on Grandpa's truck. So I'm a little 6-year-old kid. Back then I had a head full of hair, no longer, but my hair was blonde, and it was so blonde it was almost white. And she said she could see my little white head running hard as I could, bouncing, screaming, "Grandma, Grandma, come quick." So I run into the house and I'm like, "Grandma, come quick, Grandpa's sick, I need you." So she goes outside. The pickup truck's parked in the middle of the front yard because when we got to the house, Grandpa said, "As soon as we hit the driveway, you go get your grandma." So I turned his steering wheel to go into his driveway and I never straightened it back up. As soon as I knew I was safe in the driveway, I opened the door up and I just take off running with the truck not even stopping. Grandpa hits the brakes, he stops in the middle of the front yard. Grandma gets out there and she's like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "I don't feel good, something's happened." So she says, "Glenn, help me get her to the car." She had a big old 1976 brown LTD, a big land yacht car. So I help me and Grandma get him to the car. She says, "Glenn, go in the house, get my purse, get my special wallet that held like her insurance cards and stuff." And so I run in the house and I go grab her purse. You know, it's huge compared to me. So I come running out with this like 50-pound purse, it seems like. And I give it to Grandma. And she's like, "I'm going to take your daddy to the hospital. You sit here and you make sure no one goes in my house." I said, "Okay." So I go sit on the back porch under the carport and guard the house at 6 years old. They take off, they go to the hospital. They check Grandpa out and he actually had a heart murmur and his heart had jumped out of rhythm. And she didn't know, he didn't know he had a heart issue. So they give him some medicine and treatments and say, hey, he should stabilize. And he did, he started feeling better. And then they decide, well, just to be safe, we'll keep him overnight and make sure everything's okay. So then Grandma calls somebody, one of her kids, to go to the house where I'm at, get his PJs and take to the hospital because she wanted him presentable at all times. So my uncle shows up at the house to get his PJs, and I'm just sitting on the back porch. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, Grandma told me no one could go in the house, man. So I'm just sitting here till they get back." And he's like, "Well, they're going to keep Daddy tonight. And Mama sent me to get his PJs. I'm going to go get his PJs." And I said, "You can't go in this house. Grandma told me no one goes in." And he looked at me and he said, "Boy, if you don't want to get your whoop, you would get out my way." And Uncle Dave was a big dude. He weighed like 480. So I got out of his way. He goes and gets the PJs. Blah, blah, blah. Takes them to the hospital. While he's taking them to the hospital, Grandpa starts crying. And Grandma goes and gets the doctor thinking that whatever medicine they gave him makes this stoic man with no emotions publicly, he's crying, something's wrong. So she goes and gets the doctor. And she's like, "What's up with this? You know, y'all gave him something. This is not him." And they're like, "No, he could be a little emotional, but nothing we've done could give him that side effect." So she says, "TH, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" And he said, "Johnny Lou, I cannot believe this boy has done this to me." And she's like, "What do you mean? He saved your life. He got you home." He's like, No, not that." He said, "You know, when I lost Jimmy, I promised nobody would ever get that close to me again." He says, "And I'd be daggone if this boy ain't gone right there. Now I got to deal with him for the rest of my life," which was a good thing, but you know what I'm saying. He realized it. And then he looked at Grandma and said, "Wait a second. Where is Glenn?" And she goes, "We've left him at home." So by this time, it's like 8:30, 9 o'clock. They finally send someone to relieve me and lock the door up and make me go back to my house so I can get some sleep or whatever and do that. So when I'd sit with Grandpa, I would whittle. He had an old-timer pocket knife, and I had to have an old-timer pocket knife because if Grandpa's got one, I got to have it. So I'd sit on the tailgate or whatever, get a stick, and I'd be carving it and everything else. And we'd talk, and he would, tell me all kinds of things or whatever. Stories of growing up and being so poor that him and his brother, they couldn't afford 2 hot dogs, so they'd get 1 hot dog, and one could eat the hot dog, and the other one could eat the bun with the chili in it, and they'd split it. Just all these little stories, which is probably why I tell all these stories now. So Grandpa passes away in 2001. And even the day he passed, he was in pajamas, but in his work pants that he still kept in case he put on his he wore carpenter pants before they were carpenter jeans before they were cool. You know, they came in style afterwards. But and I still have it. In his pocket was his pocket knife that he kept, and he kept my pocket knife. I am at this time I am 22 years old, 21, 22 years old. He still carried my pocket knife every day in his pocket because he was scared if I took it to school when I was 5, it would get confiscated because you can't take a knife to school, and he didn't want me to lose my knife, so he always kept it in his pocket. And if you look at these two knives, my knife is brand new looking, just like the day it was bought. Couple of little scratches on it. Grandpa's knife has been sharpened so much it's almost all the way up to the thumbnail pulls where you pull the blade out. So that's one of my prized possessions. But he was I was blessed to have him. He was about as good a person as it could be. So that's Grandpa.